see you, Albert, and hear those words. Next up, we're going to be interviewing Louise Adongo. Louise and I connected through Fahima, and who has hosted many of these calls. I haven't spent much time with Louise, but I know that she cites her parents and grandparents as significant influences in her work and community service work. I know she holds degrees in biochemistry and applied research. She's a public policy specialist for the government of Nova Scotia, involved in Brilliant Labs and the Credit Union Atlantic. Welcome, Louise. I'm so excited to get to know you and see your face. It's a little different from the phone calls. Can you give us a little context about the work that you do, and how is that related to the leadership moment you're going to share with us today?
Well, I can answer your question, but I don't know if the work I do is going to be related to a leadership moment that I share, and the leadership moment that I share is not necessarily a moment. So not sure how this goes, if it's question and answer, or if I can just share my remarks. I'm wondering if perhaps I can share my remarks and then throw it back to you for if there's more to cover. Good. Okay, so hello, people that I know who are here today and people that I don't know yet. I'm glad that you've taken the time to spend with us today in this topic. When I was thinking about what I would want to say, I realized that I could think of moments where I felt in my heart, usually it's in my heart and not in my head, that something needs to shift, something needs to change, someone needs to say something, someone needs to do something, and maybe that someone is me. And I also reflected on my comfort or discomfort with leadership. So I can think of probably the very first time somebody interacted with me and spoke to me and asked me about leadership. And it was maybe 3 or 4 years ago, for the Sustainable Leadership Certificate Program at Dalhousie University, where the participants go into the community and interview people. And so this person met with me at Starbucks and asked me, why am I a leader, or what do I think about leadership? And it occurred to me that I don't actually think of myself as a leader. I don't think in terms, I guess, of as a leader, I'm going to do this, or this is going to happen as part of my leadership. How I walk through life is that drawing from, and as Duncan said, just kind of, the roots and the trunk of my upbringing, my community involvement, circumstances that I've been in, and what decisions I've made about how I'm going to move through life based on that has impacted how I live and I work and I breathe and I move. And if that is determined by those around me to be leadership, then, that's great. The other thing that I wanted to say is my answer around leadership questions that I get asked from time to time changes, which I think means that leadership is temporal, it's situational, and it's really impacted by context. And I say that because I've been in conversation with a friend of mine for a while around her own exploration of leadership. And she has said to me sometimes, particularly when showing authenticity and true personality or not personality, she said, when you squeeze oranges, you get orange juice. And one of my reflections is that's true, but depending on what's going on, when you squeeze the oranges to get orange juice, it can be tangy, it can be less tangy, it can be with pulp, it can be without pulp. So those are some of the conversations that I had been surfacing for me, particularly in 2020, and in this conversation around reauthoring leadership. One final thing that I guess I would say before I throw it back to you, Duncan, is I'm enrolled in a developmental evaluation course at the moment. And we are it's like the last week of the course, so we're reflecting on what we've learned through the course. And somebody said something that just stood out to me with like bright flashing lights, which was that we don't have to ignore what we are seeing. And for me, that has been super grounding, I guess, I would say, for 2020, because I think that in the context, particularly of pandemic type situations that have been affecting marginalized communities, and the climate change issue that, as Elder Marshall has said, hasn't risen to the level of something that we need to address, there have definitely been segments of populations that have been experiencing things that others of us have either not known how to engage with, or have through our own lives, it's not happening to us, so it's not happening, that in 2020, in a very different way, we really just could no longer, or we chose not to, or we have decided that we're not going to anymore ignore what we are seeing. And for me, that is really exciting. And I'm curious what that means going forward. And I'm really hopeful that it doesn't mean that once the vaccine is distributed and we're vaccinated, that will change back. Although the distribution of the vaccine could be its own leadership conversation. So I won't say more than that. I'm going to throw it back to you, Duncan, and because maybe you have more questions for me. Thank you.
I have so many questions. I am wondering if there's a particular moment that that you see leadership rising up out of those contexts that you were alluding to. Is there something that has happened recently that you're seeing where leadership is rising out of?
Do you mean for me specifically, or that I've noticed for people?
Yeah, you specifically, yeah.
Yeah. So again, I don't. So I guess a moment that I can say is that I am uncomfortable that leadership needs to rise for me. I guess what I'm saying is that I think that small actions, big actions, medium-sized actions for me should be, this is how I live, and not a rising or a not rising of leadership. So I'm not sure if what I'm saying is being clear. Hopefully some people can, when this goes out into breakout groups, people can intuit what I mean. So here's another anecdote I guess I would share, since it's about moments. There's another friend of mine who I do not watch The Wire. I cannot bring myself to watch The Wire. I have tried to watch it and I find it traumatic, even when I just watch brief episodes of it on YouTube. However, this friend of mine talks to me in Wire memes. It's actually a cute joke between us. And one of the ones that consistently comes up for her, to answer your question, is when something has happened and, I guess we would call it leadership has risen in me, and I've experienced resistance or a pushback, or something has happened that shakes my confidence. She will share with me this meme that I'm not going to give it in its state because it could be offensive to some, but basically it says, and you can look it up on Google, there you go again, caring when it's not your turn to care. So I guess I would say that for me, the moment rising is a consistent and continuous moment that rises, that perhaps I don't want to accept that it will ever be my turn not to care.
Can I share something with that, add something to that?
Okay.
Yes, please. Yep.
I'm hoping that the reason why this question of leadership is rising up now, because I'm really hoping that people are beginning to see, like what we have been looking at and seeing for a long period of time, is that there is an overlay of complacency in which the true definition of leadership is no longer an issue. But anyone in power could present themselves in any shape or form to be as a ruler, because really that's what it really boils down to today. when we talk about any governance, the especially the federal government, no matter what color they may be, is that corporations, as long as we can continuously do everything of allowing and helping the corporations to continuously maximize their profits, then this is what we're expected to do. But whenever there is so through that, then they have somehow managed to cultivate this complacency. It's just like Susan and I were talking about earlier, that where we see it is that if you can train people for a long period of time to degrade and to oppress them, to feel degraded and oppressed, then you create an environment in which you can oppress them forever, any way you want to. So the question is then, how many people are willing to admit and to agree that this heavy layer of complacency it's becoming problematic, and it's becoming very advantageous for others, like the industries, to keep continuously compromise our very existence by compromising nature to be able to continuously be healthy so she can sustain ourselves. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that are we just going to be aware of it, or are we going to really look upon this as this is the kind of a transformative change that we need to make? And once we identify that need, then the next question is, who's going to convene all these little groups to start talking about or planning the kind of a transformative change that we will need to ensure not just our survival or longevity, but also for the coming generations that might follow us, will also have the same opportunities as we have. Shouldn't that be our overall objective? Shouldn't that be our overall responsibility while we are here, whatever length of time that we're going to be here, as to ensure that no action of ours or others would be able to compromise not just this generation, but for the coming generations as well, to be able to sustain themselves, enjoy and learn what nature is providing, what nature is teaching us. So this all completely mind shift. How far are we willing to go with it?
Thank you, Albert. I got a message from someone. I'm wondering if you could introduce yourself to everyone, as I think only a few people were on the call when you started speaking before.
Well, I'm an old Mi'kmaq from Cape Breton Island, and my name is Albert Marshall. I am from Mi'kma'ki, but I happen to reside in the community called Eskisoni. And I am from a Moose clan, and I have no credentials other than to say I am a student of life. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Albert. Albert has been a big part of our project so far. And thank you for your words, Albert. And thank you, Louise. Louise, was there anything you wanted to add at this time?
Yeah, let me just refer to my notes. I'm just going to read it so that I just make it punchy. So all my greatest inspirations as leaders have been people that consistently just did what they did in the service of what was needed. So so they weren't really thinking, how am I going to rise up as a leader? They were more driven by focusing on seeking justice or solving a problem or being an explorer to a new frontier. And so I think, I guess, positionally, part of what I think in terms of reauthoring leadership is a refocus on purpose. And then going a little bit back to what Elder Marshall said, and for people who don't know who are on here, he is one of the pioneers of two-eyed seeing. And I think in terms of reauthoring leadership, our conversation needs to look at who are the leaders, or who are the people who have sought justice or have tried to solve problems or call attention to problems, or who have tried to explore new frontiers, who haven't had space to do so traditionally because of the way in which our structures have ignored, kept out, dismissed, decided what was important. Those are questions that I hope that I will be able to be part of the breakout sessions exploring, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what the two additional speakers have to say. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Wow, so many gifts. I took some feverish notes here. Our next guest is Jim Drescher. Jim is going to be interviewed by Alfred, and met Jim through Windhorse Farm, where he's stewarded that for, I think, about 30 years. I looked up, and Jim has been part of How We Thrive and co-founded Nothing Missing Leadership, and he co-directs Windhorse Farm. And I'm constantly inspired by the way he combines mindfulness and ecology and forest leadership practices, and creates space for people at Windhorse Farm. So welcome, Jim, and I'm going to turn it over to Alfred Burgesson, who's one of our guests, who will be interviewing Jim today. Welcome, Alfred.
Thanks, Duncan. Thanks, Olu. Thanks, everyone, for joining this conversation today. It's good to see so many faces. Hello, Jim. Jim, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Alfred. Nice to see you. Big stone wall behind you. Where are you?
I'm in Halifax. Yeah. Jim, you and I have, over the last couple of years, gotten to know each other. I consider you a mentor, a teacher, a friend to me. And, you know, I've spent a lot of time at Windhorse. And I think perhaps for folks who are on this call who don't know you or don't know about Windhorse, maybe could you give us, you know, a 30-second to a minute elevator pitch on Windhorse and on what you do there?
Sure. Thanks, Alfred. And thank you, Duncan. I suppose the first thing I should say is that my co-director and life partner and best friend is also on this call. I can't see her picture right now, Margaret. And so she's been here co-directing Windhorse Farm for the past 30 years too. Well, I don't know much what to say about this place. Looking around, I think most of you have been here. And if you haven't been, please come. It's quite it's an amazing place in the land with all of the beings of the land here as teachers. And many people come here, and they come for all kinds of reasons, and discover often when they're here that that's not the reason that they came, that the reason was something that they didn't even know about before. So that's certainly true for me.
Great. Thanks for that sort of quick intro of Windhorse and why you're there. Jim, you and I have had lots of conversations around leadership, and you have a practice called Nothing Missing Leadership that I've learned about, and I think is quite wholesome. And there are points of logic to this leadership that have been really useful for me. And I was wondering if you could share the 5-point logic of nothing missing leadership to the folks on this call today.
Yeah, sure. Leadership in the way that I am coming into relationship with it is a practice of healing. And there is, as Alfred has asked for here, there is a logic to this this way of thinking about leadership, which is nothing missing leadership. And I'll just go through it very quickly because we need to get on to a moment. But the view of nothing missing leadership is that everyone is fundamentally whole and healthy and worthy, and that everyone has the capacity to thrive, and that everyone deserves to thrive. That's the view. The practice is creating the causes and conditions for everyone to thrive. So the practice is really practice of kindness and compassion. It's a practice of discernment. You know, what's actually useful in creating those causes and conditions. So it involves our analytical intelligence and our sensitivity and what's useful in this situation. What situation in creating the causes and conditions for everyone to thrive. That's the practice. The activity is really unlocking the natural inherent capacity of all people for this kind of leadership. And the result, if one holds this view and practices in this way, and that's the activity, then the result is that in any organization or community or family or society, everyone is a leader from their own place. And every leader is in training. Nobody got it all figured out yet. And everyone in the collective understands those two things to be true. And the fifth point, Alfred, is just a reminder of the first one, which is that this is all baked in. This isn't something we create because it already exists this way. This is who we are, and this is how it is. So that's just a rundown of the logic because you asked. But really, most of leadership that I experience myself and that I see in everyone else that I meet, not only the human animals, but all the other beings of this land too, that we're practicing. So the practice is what's important. And for us as human beings, the practice is really becoming increasingly aware of the fact that we are already connected, aware of the fact that it's all connected. Everything is interdependent. And we do that, the practice is through listening, through feeling, through actually being seen and being in someone else's body and situation, and realizing that connection that already exists through listening, through looking, through feeling, and then relaxing in that connection, relaxing in that awareness of already connected. So the connection then naturally leads to caring. You can't connect with any person or any animal or any idea without caring. So the caring then in the work that we do here around Nothing Missing, the caring has a 4-step cycle or spiral of caring. And then the result of caring leads into engagement. How do we actually engage in the world in ways that are healing? So that's maybe just a little thumbnail introduction, Alfred, to that. But I think maybe I'm supposed to share some moment, eh?
Yeah, let's move on to that. Thanks for sharing the Nothing Missing theory. But please, yeah, share a moment with us, Jim, where...
So this is an example of, if you've been to Windhorse, you've probably been on a night walk here. It's one of the practices here. We do a lot of different kinds of walks, but one of the walks is night walking. And I've probably been on more than 100 night walks with groups of people who are here at Come to Windhorse. And this is a story about one of those times, which happened maybe, I don't know exactly, 8 or 10 years ago. And I was co-facilitating a leadership retreat for the executives of a company in Toronto. And there were 8 of them here, their whole executive group. And we went on a night walk, as we always do when a group's here. And it was cool. It wasn't real cold. It was above freezing. It was raining a little bit like it is today. And it was very dark. The clouds were covering whatever starlight there was. And it was a new moon. So there was no moonlight through the clouds. So very dark. We went to, did the first part of the walk. We were in the second part of the walk where people are experiencing a solitary night walk, and they were off walking, and we gathered back. I called people back after 15 or 20 minutes. And then I started going on the next part, the third part of this night walk. And I realized fairly soon that I wasn't on the trail where I thought I was. But I thought, well, I'll just find it. And I just kind of going off. It's completely dark, no lights. And I didn't reconnect with the trail. And I kept getting further and further lost. And I'm getting very anxious because these people from Toronto, they don't know anything about being out in the woods and at night. So we get into, and I'm making continually the mistake of going on, going forward, going, leading. So pretty soon we're in this wetland, and we're up to our knees in water and thick trees, and it's cold, and I'm getting cold, and I'm realizing everybody else is getting cold, and we've been out now for a couple of hours, and really I'm completely lost. And so I just gave in, and I gathered people, and I said, I'm just going to tell you that I am completely lost. I have no idea where we are. I have no idea how to get to where we need to get to. I have no idea how to get home. So what do you think we should do? And of course, everybody had ideas, and I just kind of let that happen, and I just stepped aside and just tried to breathe and relax a little bit. And I stood there for, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes, and they were talking about how we were going to get out. And just a little opening in the clouds opened, and I could see the North Star. And it wasn't that I needed to see the North Star to see what direction we were in, because I had a compass, but somehow just seeing the North Star just said, oh, I can just rest and be in this situation completely. So I said, the conversation with people, everyone had ideas, and someone had the idea of sort of walking in this direction that I now knew was where we had to go. And I said, okay, let's go there. And so we managed to get out. And when we got back to the fire, I apologized to everyone. I said, I was lost, and I did like about 4 or 5 things wrong all at the same time, which caused us to get lost. And I'm really sorry. I will never do a night walk like this again. I'll do better preparation. And so, not too much was said. I mean, people talked about their experience. People had, pretty dramatic experiences that night. And so I wrote to everybody, the retreat was over. I wrote to everybody afterward and apologized again and told them what I was going to do in the future for future walks so that wouldn't happen. And I talked to, about 2 weeks later, the president of the company called me and he said, Jim, I believe you that you were lost, but no one on our team thinks that was true. They think that was just part of the experience. That's the moment, Alfred.
Wow. So what do you think the lesson is in that moment?
Well, for me, I think it was something like relax and just go into what is.
Mm-hmm. And perhaps a bit of being vulnerable as well.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing that moment with us, Jim. The last question I'll ask you is a little bit different than what was sent to you. And I was planning to sort of ask you some different questions anyway. But the last question is, Jim, what advice would you give to people who don't see themselves as leaders?
Well, I don't have any advice, but I can say that I do see you as a leader. Anyone that would say that to me is a leader. So I think that's the challenge we all have, is to relax into our leadership and be who we are.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Jim. Looking forward to further conversation later in the chat today.
And thanks, Alfred.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Alfred. Thank you, Duncan. Thank you, everyone. That was really great and a lot of gifts. So our next guest is Alfred Burgesson. He just spoke. I'm connected to Alfred in so many ways, from youth and community development to social innovation, collective action, HFX Collective, and he's also my very good friend. I think our first time working together was on the Weave East Backbone team. Our relationship since then has just nurtured a creative process of working together, through which I believe there are never-ending possibilities. Alfred is a member of the Prime Minister's Youth Council and a project lead at the Center for Employment Innovation. I like to refer to him as the plug because I'm inspired by like the way Alfred is able to connect so many pieces together. Welcome, Alfred. I'm excited to talk to you and hear about the way you serve. Can you give us a little context about the work you do that is related to the leadership moment you will share with us, Alfred?
Sure. Thanks for the intro, Olu. Great to see you. Thanks for the invitation. Some context would be, I'm a young person and people perceive me to be a leader. And I think primarily that's been the case due to me using my voice and sort of finding ways to take action on things that I believe are wrong, or things that I believe there's a better solution to. I often speak up or bring people together to find a solution. And so I think that's probably the greatest context I can give you. And just through my experience through various work like the Youth Council, what I've learned even more in the last year of being involved in that is, even though I'm a leader, and even though they've created a space for leaders across Canada to speak directly to the PM, one voice is not as impactful as many voices. And so I think that's been a big lesson for me in the last year is my voice alone cannot sort of influence change. It's really back to what Albert Marshall was saying earlier. It's many voices and many people from diverse backgrounds speaking up on things that are wrong, or speaking up when they have a solution to a problem, and having a unified voice and bringing that forward to community, to decision makers, to those in power. So yeah, that's the context I can give you, Olum.
Thank you, Alfred. Can you take us to a moment of leadership within this work? Who was there in this moment? What happened? What do you see, smell, hear, or feel in this moment? And what were you seeing at that time?
Mm-hmm. Well, the moment I want to share happened in, I believe it was September. I was at home. It was the end of a work day. I was on my phone and I was scrolling through Facebook, and I saw a live stream video that was on my feed, and I clicked on it. And the live stream video was essentially a Mi'kmaq fisherman driving to the wharf and being confronted by about 200 bystanders, 200 people that were having an issue with Indigenous people going out to fish right now. And so in that moment, I was angry, and the comments were definitely sort of angry, and like it was a heated moment. But I was really impressed by how composed the person who was, literally being confronted by 200 people, how composed he was, and how he was really engaging in a conversation with these people who were pissed off at him for as he was just exercising his rights. But that moment, in that moment, I knew that something needed to be done in terms of the racism that Indigenous fishermen were facing at that time. And so I used a tool called New Mode. And New Mode is a tool that is it's a Canadian created tool, but it allows people to launch advocacy campaigns online. And so I was in contact with folks on Instagram about what was happening down there, and someone who was very knowledgeable about what was going on sent me a letter that the community had created to send to decision makers, so MPs and ministers of fisheries and ministers of Indigenous relations, and they shared this document, this letter, in a Google Doc, and said essentially, can people copy and paste this and send it to our elected officials? And I knew that New Mode, the tool that New Mode has, would be useful because it makes it really simple for anyone to go online to see the letter and to put in their name, their postal code, and by putting in your postal code, it sends that notice directly to your MP, your MLA, whether it's a prime minister or other related ministers. It allows that person, in about 10 seconds of putting in your name, your email, and your postal code, in about 10 seconds, it allows that person to send the email. So it's quite intuitive. And I would say in that moment, and I'm gonna put the link to that campaign in the chat here so folks can see it if they haven't. But I think that moment was a really powerful one, creating that tool, because in a matter of weeks, over 30,000 people used the tool to speak up on the injustice that was happening in Mi'kmaq. And so, yeah, it still boggles my mind how quickly this action sort of moved from coast to coast. And yeah, I think that's a moment that I'm always thinking about, how do I replicate that with other issues happening in the world or here in Canada? How do we unify people's voices to demand change, demand justice from our elected officials? And so that moment has been, yeah, one that has motivated me and has proven to work. Although the fishermen and the Mi'kmaq people are still dealing with DFO, the message was definitely sent to the government that people are watching and people demand better from our government.
Wow, that's really powerful. Collective action. Thank you, Alfred. Where do you see good leadership rise in, and what have you learned about leadership?
In the last couple of years, I think watching young people lead the climate action movement has been really inspiring. And, you know, I think in the same way that Elder Albert Marshall looks at two-eyed seeing, I think Indigenous knowledge is definitely needs to be considered moving forward as we make decisions on environment, on our economy, on many facets of our life. Youth voices and Indigenous voices, I feel, need to be included, and because they are leaders and they have been leading in terms of Indigenous people, they've been leaders for generations of years in terms of how their way of living. And with youth, seeing them take to the streets and demand change has been truly impactful. But at the same time, those people who are, you know, living in a way or taking action, sometimes what I've learned is sometimes those people are not decision makers. They may make the news, they may make enough noise to get something flagged or you know, mentioned in the news, but they're not decision makers. And sorry, they are decision makers in their everyday lives, but in terms of systemic change and influencing broad systems change and decisions, they don't have a voice. And so I think moving forward, I would be intentional sort of ways where we include Indigenous voices, include youth voices into the decisions that are being made. And more broadly, I think I'm hoping that collective action can be a useful tool for exercises like that.
Wow, thank you so much, Alfred, for sharing your gifts and story with us today. That was really powerful. We're going to move to the reflection session now, and we're going to go into small groups of 3 again. And we have like 5 minutes each to just reflect and listen to each other. So I'm going to pose the question for that particular session in the chat now. So basically we thought, okay, thank you, Duncan, for posting it. So you just talk about what struck you about what you've read so far, what moved you, what resonated for you, what moment in your life does this take you to, and who was there, what happened. I mean, it can be any moment. It doesn't have to be life defining. It can be the smallest moment, weird moment, surprising moment. The point is that people are being able to imagine you in the moment and see what they learn from leadership through a moment within a story, rather than you telling us about leadership. We're using story as a learning tool instead of telling people what leadership is. So Susan, please open us into the
That was Frank, yes.
Okay. Everyone.
I thought so.
So we have a few.
Impressive person. Sorry. Excuse me.
Hi, Jackie. No worries. No problem at all. So I'm just going to post some questions in the chat, and we're going to try something different this time. So I think everyone's back. So the questions are in the chat, and we're going to do a chat reflection, but I'm going to ask everyone to type their reflections in the chat, but not hit enter. until we say so, so that they're not all running by. So I'll check back in 2 minutes. We can all type our reflections, and then in 2 minutes or so, we'll hit enter. Thank you, Alfred. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Oh.
If other things are coming up, feel free to continue to add to our chat.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you, Duncan. Thank you, Fahima, and all of those who shared. Thank you so much.